Welcome back everyone. I'm more than excited to announce that this is my first ever real development log because this week is when I started development on my game Dead on Arrival. If you want to get more frequent updates on what happens during development, you might consider checking out my Twitter and Instagram profiles, both of which are linked in the description next to a few other links. As this is my first devlog in video format, I'm not yet sure how I'm going to do this, same as with game development basically. I'll probably try a few different iterations and wrap this up similar to the devlogs I've written on itch.io for my other game Nuns and Roses. First off, let's talk a little about Dead on Arrival. I've mentioned this about 100 times before, but I currently study game design and I am currently in my 5th semester. This semester is supposed to be an internship semester, but as I couldn't find an QA internship, I was stuck with finding another option. This option was talked through with my professor and we ended up with something that I was able to do on my own. For those of you who might not know me from this channel or from social media, I consider myself primarily an author and game designer and secondarily a shitposter. No, but in all seriousness, I am primarily a project manager and a narrative designer / game designer / game writer, and secondarily a hobbyist, author and artist. So I had to choose a project that A, fulfilled the requirements for this semester, which means a 40-hour week job for at least 5.5 months, and B, a project that was small enough in scope that I could work on it by myself. After a short conversation with my professor, he asked me if I thought about making a visual novel, to which I said, no. I asked if that was actually enough for a project like this, and he said yes, so that's what I ended up pitching to him. And this is basically what I ended up doing right now. Dead on Arrival takes a little different route as most visual novels, as it does not feature romantic subplots or characters that you can romance. Also, the player doesn't take on the role of a single character, but instead he acts as a kind of invisible author leading the character through the story. The story is about 4 young adults who escape from prison and go on a journey in search of their lost memories. The idea behind this, as with most creative things I work on, is to make a game that I would like to play. Nothing against visual novels with romantic or erotic content, it's just that developers can use the format to make more versatile games and not necessarily just romance games in this case. Maybe some of you might be asking what a development log actually is. Basically, it's most often a written update on the progress of a game's development, and I think devlogs, especially from indie devs, are a good way to present to players what happens during game development. So hooray, this video series is going to have educational value. I am currently in the first development phase that's called pre-production. From experience, this is most often the least favorite phase because developers want to make the game. But for me as a project manager, this is my favorite phase because that's when I actually do my work most of the time. Because I work alone on this project and I have a reasonable understanding of how I work, this part felt a little flat during Dead on Arrival. This doesn't mean that I don't do any project management at all, that's not true, but it's of course less work than if I were to work in a team. As a one-person team, management contains document management and basic planning. As of now, not very much more. What I do is keep track of what I've done every day, and I use a trusty notebook and an app for that I'm going to show you in just a second. In my notebook, that's some weird Moleskine professional business notebook that I got from TJ Maxx for like $6 years ago, I make a little square for every hour of the day that I work on and mark it with what I've done. I use color coding because it looks nice and it's easily understandable on first glance. Then I also write down what I've actually done that day in specific and if I have any appointments that interfere with my, in quotes, office hours. Because I work from home and because of like 10 other reasons, I have to comply with my parents for the duration of this project. That means for the next 6 months. So if I have to help my mom in the household for 2 hours, I need to do that. And I need to subtract this from my office hours. And because I'm not happy with the idea of working all night, I'm not working overtime. So let's look at what I've done this week. I announced Dead on Arrival on social media. I started working on the game design document and the art bible. I wrote a rough synopses for the prologue and the first half of the first chapter. I finished writing the prologue. I thought about game mechanics and scrapped them again. I will talk about this a little bit later. I built the prologue as a dialogue tree in Twine. I made mood boards for the prologue and the chapters 1, 2, 3. And I had some problems with coding. In total, this week I spent approximately 6 hours on project and file management, 6 hours on writing, 4.5 hours on game art and research, 3 hours on game design, 1 hour on coding, 1.5 hours on social media, and 13 hours on miscellaneous stuff and lollygagging. You might notice that this is not a full 40 hours, and that's because I didn't include my lunch breaks in this. I had 5 hours of lunch break in this week. So it's a full 40-hour week. Don't worry, I'm not trying to scam anyone. It's a question that my professor asked me during my pitch that I found myself yet unable to answer is what the city backgrounds should look like, because A, generic cities are, quote, problematic, and B, it would make sense to use real-life references. Listen up, maybe if I scream into the void, somebody will answer me. On one hand, I wanted to use some spots in Hamburg as a reference because, hey, that's cool, right? That's where I basically live, and it's kind of interesting to not show, like, an American city for once. But I'm gonna be in Hamburg for a total of maybe 3 weeks this remaining year, and it's not enough time to gather all the photos I would need. And also, I feel a little weird just taking photographs of the streets, and because I would need references from at night, it would be even more weird. Then again, American cities, I'm not sure if I want to do that. And my professor actually voiced that maybe I could use Japanese background, basically Tokyo. And I personally would only do that for the, in quotes, aesthetic, because the characters don't have Japanese names and it's very, let's say, US-centric, so it wouldn't make sense if this was to take place in Japan. So I'm currently just trying to figure out how I'm going to work with the backgrounds and the aesthetic I want to achieve. So I hope to get this figured out by next week, because that's where I actually need to research references and start kind of mapping out which backgrounds I need. Also, let's talk about the scrapped game mechanics I just mentioned. Even though I scrapped it, I'm kind of still keeping it in the back of my head, and I want to share this with you because I'm still feeling kinda unsure. This is what the current dialogue tree for the prologue looks like, and hey, it's pretty small, but it's just a prologue. And this is what the first draft looked like. The mess to the right is what the idea of having a key in this scene looks like. The way this works is the characters find a room and the player can decide whether or not they should check it out. If he does, he is presented with 4 different dialogue options. If he chooses the first one character will find a key. Another character then urges them to get going, and the player has the option to check the other places in the room. And this is also the part where I had my coding problems, because I had the idea that if the player has already checked out the specific place and got the key, he should not be able to get the key again, which makes sense, of course. And same for the other scenes, but at the same time, this cost me like 1 hour of coding for basically one variable and one if-else statement. That's unfortunate, and the reason I cut this out is A, because of the coding problems, and B, because it doesn't make sense for the story if the character finds a key. Because my idea was he finds the key, then they go outside and find a car. And the option would be, if the player doesn't have a key, the characters can try to basically hijack the car. But at the same time, if they fail, or if I don't even give them the option to do that, they have to walk. But then the question is, if they walk, what happens next? And this would lead to me having 2 different first chapters, and this is something I don't want to do, because I pitched this game as I want to have as little scenes as possible, but have as much depth in story as possible. So this is kind of going against my game design, so I just scrapped it, but I kept the dialogue tree in Twine just in case I still want to use it. So if you think that this is completely convoluted, paranoid, and unreasonable, welcome. This is my brain every day, but this is basically what I have to work with right now. And all of this mess basically means that I'm currently stuck at how much freedom do I want to give my player without making development hell for myself? And I feel like this is a question that's going to persist throughout the entire development of the game. Basically, what I thought didn't went well this week was the sheer amount of time wasting I did. Again, I said 13 hours of basically lollygagging. So with lunch breaks, this took up almost half of my work hours, and this is not efficient work time. So this is something I seek to improve by doing task-oriented days. What that means is that on one day I will focus on one thing, like this day I will do writing, this day I will do art, this day I will just do management. And I will see if this works out next week. If it doesn't, then I'm trying to find another way to work it more efficiently. And next is my approach to writing the story. If a scene will have a lot of branches, I will try to work it out in Twine first and then write everything down, because I noticed that I did a lot of revisions from my writing software to Twine, and it just took up so much time that I could categorize it as basically wasted time, because it's not very efficient. And basically what I try to do is work as efficiently as possible, because 1, I'm only one person, and 2, I have a deadline to meet. So yeah, basically I need to work efficiently. It's not like I have 3 years to make this game. I think I said 120 days, which works out to 6 months basically. And this is what I want to do next week. Next week I want to finish all the remaining mood boards. I want to finish writing at least the full synopses for chapter 1 and start implementing it in Twine. I also want to figure out how implementing pictures works in Twine, because I just found out that that's actually an option. And I want to work a little bit more on the art bible and the game design document so that they're finished once I start getting into the prototype phase. And I think that's all I wanted to talk about for today. If you have any ideas or what else I could include in these devlogs, I thought about maybe showing mood boards or showing like more things, but as I'm currently in the pre-production, I don't have like any prototype to show. But if you have ideas, please feel free to add them in the comments. Same goes if you have questions about anything. Again, this has some kind of educational value, so if you want to know something about my game development or terminology or something, just ask. And otherwise, this is all, and I hope I see you next week for the next devlog update. Bye!